As you can see, it is January 24th, and the last podcast we put out was January 15th. And we said that, I said that I would bring my entire setup to Austin to record a podcast with you guys in person. And, lo and behold, I load a giant fucking chest of all the monitor, the PC, the mics, literally everything that I would need. And I get there, I'm there for 3 nights, and you guys don't make any time for me to record a podcast. So here we are, the Sunday after.
That's a lie. We try to do this with you. You just were busy with your family obligations. You just ignored us. That's it.
Victor and I even met up specifically to do it, and you were just too busy.
Yeah.
Oh,
us,
okay.
So.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Yeah. See, I
mean, it's fine, Jacob. We weren't upset about it, but if you're gonna start talking shit about it,
yeah, you can't throw us under the bush, under the bus in front of our millions of fans right here.
I just want you both to know how much of a pain in the ass it was to get it in the car, drive it to Austin, and then drive back to Houston with it and unload it all. So
and set it all back up.
And set it all back up in hopes of recording a podcast the next day. And then Ethan's like, oh, I can't. And then I hit a Victor, and Victor just says he straight up, he just doesn't want to do it.
That guy sounds like an asshole.
Yeah, he really does. But anyways, we are finally back. Yes, and we have a name change, so we need to discuss this. So we are no longer going by
after much deliberation.
We'll say this was a heated debate last Saturday night. It was between the pull-up 3 and the contested 3, because we wanted the title to relate to the NBA and also relate to 3 hosts. And so after a lot of debate, we decided on the contested 3, and we have a new header. We have an actual Instagram account for it, and all the YouTube stuff is updated as well. So we are all looking official. We have a lot of NBA news to cover because we have not talked about it in a while. So I did want to talk about Steph Curry. Last night he passed Reggie Miller to become the second place in all-time 3-points made list. And now he is only 411 3-pointers behind Ray Allen for the number 1 spot. So at this point, it's only a matter of time before he actually hits that milestone, right?
For those 400 3-pointers, that is career total, or that's in one season?
Career total.
That's in one season. He's done one season?
No, yeah, that's just overall careers. He's made. That
makes sense.
He's made 2,561.
Oh yeah. Yeah, well, that can't do in a season.
Yeah, absolutely not.
Yeah, it's the nature of the game today, right? I mean, Reggie Miller, if he had to be playing today, and you could say this about any volume shooter, Steph Curry changed the game, but he also came around at a time where the league was ready to be changed. And for a player like that to take advantage of the rule changes and the pace and all that. I don't have the stats in front of you about how many threes Reggie Miller shot per game, but Steph Curry, not only is he one of the greatest shooters of all time, he is that offense, and the offense is revolved around you can do whatever you want, but I might pull up from 38 feet.
Exactly. So. And the fact that, we talked about this on a previous podcast, but that he's made over 40% of his threes, and the amount that he shoots every single game, the fact that he's averaging that for his entire career, he's not a new player. He's obviously a longtime veteran. Is even more substantial.
Yeah, well, sure. I think Reggie Miller's numbers, he was unique. He tried more threes and was successful. But it was Ethan said, it's in an era that's threes wasn't part of the game. Now I feel like the bar is set to whoever could beat Steph is impressive. But beating Reggie Miller, I feel like Harden's going to beat him, Steph's going to beat him, and the number of other people nowadays is going to beat him. Clay Thompson, if he could come back and play. But I feel like the bar now is set to a more truthful bar where now it's a 3-point game. Everyone has a chance. Instead of comparing nowadays, everyone shoots threes against a guy who they weren't shooting as many threes in his time as they are now. So it's like the old generations are getting flushed out, I feel like, with these stats. And now the bar is going to be set to somebody modern and new that's playing the current style of the game.
Which is exactly why Ray Allen passed Reggie Miller. Currently, Ray Allen is number one, and Ray Allen, is kind of the bridge between Reggie Miller's era and Steph Curry's. So
I'm trying to look at the exact stats. How many more threes do you think he's going to make then? Do you think it's going to be a substantial jump for Steph Curry?
Yes.
Okay. Well, how many more years do you think he has in him?
Well, if you're looking at, it's not, what did you say? It was like 200 more threes until he catches Ray Allen?
400.
400. And that's Ray Allen's career. I don't think anybody here would say that Steph is on the decline.
No, not yet.
And that's even speaking just athletically, not even talking about his shooting ability. So once the athleticism starts to go, his shooting is still going to be around for many years after that. So, I mean, he's going to get 4 or 5, maybe even 600 threes past him, I would say.
How old is he now?
He's 31 now. So, I mean, he is deep in his prime. So he probably has like 2-3 years left in his like athletic prime. But the thing is that he's a shooter. So he's going to be one of those players that ages gracefully. So I could see him playing for another 5, 6, 7 years.
For sure. But did he break his hand like twice or something?
Yeah, but the hand injuries aren't that serious, honestly. I mean, at least the ones that he's gotten. The concern for him mostly is his ankles. And so far, hasn't been too big of a deal yet, or as of late. So
if he gets one more injury in his hand, could that be like a game changer for Steph?
It totally could be. I guess at this point, now that he's older, the injuries could mean a lot more. But
I'm going to push back a little bit. I don't think at all it'll be an issue. Did you guys see that story that came out a couple days ago about how Steph Curry is able to drop his heart rate in a 90-second timeout? And he trained himself to do that, so that way he'll be able to pull up at any given moment and be able to, get on a hot shooting streak late in games, even if he's been shooting poorly before. I mean, just the way medicine has been moving, I don't think that Steph Curry, even when his athleticism goes, even if he hurts his ankles, will he be able to, dive over screens the way he is able to do right now? Probably not. But his off-ball movement, which is what differentiates a player like him from a player like James Harden or other elite guards in the league or Kyrie Irving, his off-ball movement is so threatening, and he'll always be able. That wisdom will always be there, just like LeBron James's wisdom will always be there. He'll always be a threat, no matter how old he is. If he's on the court. So if he doesn't have the ball, let's say he, is the second or third option on his team in 5-6 years, he's still going to be somebody that demands a person to be near him at any given point. So he'll affect winning. He'll be on the court and he'll still be pulling up, jacking up threes. So
for sure. But will he beat Ray Allen with like we were talking about broken hand, even though he could lower his heart rate? Does that translate to a broken hand injury still be able to perform to beat a Ray Allen stats?
I think so. I mean, maybe passing him by an incredible amount, that could be a stretch, but he'll definitely pass him. I'm confident he'll pass him.
Yeah,
you would assume, right?
Absolutely.
He's so damn good.
Assuming he doesn't tear his Achilles or anything like
that.
Yeah, something catastrophic, of course. But.
For sure. And while we're on the topic of Steph Curry, I did want to transition into the MVP list. So we're far enough into the season now where we can have a real understanding about who the best players in the league are currently. So I'll go ahead and read these out for you guys. I'll go 5-1. Steph Curry is currently 5th. We know the season that he's having. He has a career high 62-point game, which was super important for their season since they came out of the gate stumbling. And so now he is top 5 in points per game, all that stuff. Number 4 is Joel Embiid. They have, obviously he's on the 76ers and they're the best team in the East. So that makes sense. Best player on the best team.
Right.
Number 3, which may be a surprise, is Paul George for the Clippers. I mean, he's one of the best players on one of the best teams in the West, but
this list is getting worse and worse. Jesus Christ.
It's fascinating because Paul George seems to do this every single season where, he'll disappoint in the playoffs. And then at the beginning, middle of the season, everybody's like, oh, wait, he's playing so well right now. So maybe this will continue into the playoffs. And then once again,
surprise.
Yeah, it's just a constant, endless cycle. Obviously,
Paul George, he's that type of player that if you're looking for a guy to score 50 on, the fucking Hornets,
Yeah, to
He's got
Tuesday
it. Yeah, on some random Wednesday night after a back-to-back from a sub 500 team, he's your man.
Yeah.
But if you need him to, score 25 in a consequential game, or have a solid fourth quarter, at least in my experience watching him play, which has been a substantial sample size, the eye test doesn't pass, and typically the stats don't either when it comes to the playoffs, at least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for the season, he is currently averaging 25 points per game, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists rounded. So it's not bad, but obviously I don't think he's gonna end the season top 5 in MVP voting, if that means anything. So moving on to number 2, which is our boy Luka Doncic on the Dallas Mavericks.
Yeah, he deserves it.
Before we jump into that, though, Ethan, you pointed out earlier that the Mavericks are currently the 8th seed. They're right at 500. I know you had them number 2 in the West in your prediction. So
True.
do you think something's going on with him, or something's going on with the team chemistry, or?
Well, to be honest, I think Luka was hoping the season was going to start in March, and he did not anticipate having to get in shape so early.
He showed up out of shape as hell.
Yeah, it just seems a little bit slower, a little more sluggish. They didn't start the season with Porzingis, so they didn't have their second best player. I think it's underrated how important Steph Curry was to their offense. Just having a shooter that's consistent, but it's not just a shooter. He can get his own shot, he can go to the rim.
He's like a B class Steph Curry.
Sure. I mean, I think those things are probably really important. It's a weird season. I don't know. I mean, there are underperforming expectations for sure, but how many games are we in? Like 18, 19 games. So like 20%-ish through the season. I don't see them staying at the 8th seed. I think they're going to make a push forward. Are they going to go all the way up to the number 2 spot? I don't know. We'll see. But in terms of MVP ranking, he's my MVP pick going into the season. He was my MVP pick going into the season. He's still my MVP pick to win it after the end of the season. But right now, I think LeBron is probably number 1.
Well, do you have them rising up, or do you think that's where they're going to end up, is somewhere around the 8th seed?
No. I see them ending up somewhere top 4.
Okay, so you have them getting hot at some point throughout the season.
For sure. Luka's going to work himself into shape. Porzingis, barring another injury, is going to come back. They're going to gel. I think it'll be fine.
And you really can see it throughout watching the beginning of the season all the way till now, watching his actual body. Like, he looks more and more in shape every single game, like more and more conditioned. So I agree. And I'll just go.
He looked pretty damn thick.
The what?
Right.
He looked pretty damn thick.
Absolutely.
What his game reminds me of Larry Bird. Crazy talented, could do anything, but just kind of slow. I don't know if it's slow this season. He's just a bit slow and sluggish. He knows how to move his body real well, and he knows how to read the guy who's defending him so well that even though he's slow, he's super effective. But he just seems like a slow giant of Larry Bird man.
Well, I was just going to say that's indicative of the best players in the league are able to play at their own pace and require the rest of the players to work around that. And Luka's one of those guys. You can see it more obviously than some others, but he's so good that it doesn't matter if he's playing slower than you. He's so good and demands that type of defensive respect that it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't. You can see it.
Mm-hmm. There was this one play.
Larry Bird.
For sure. There was this one play. I forgot which game it was, but he had the steal, wide open lane to where he could have dunked it, but he just laid it in softly. He's not there yet, but if this is his floor for how good he's going to be this season, and he's a number 2 candidate for the MVP voting, I think the Mavericks are going to be just fine.
No, what injury does this guy have? I'm not certain he has an injury, but this guy plays like every time he makes a basket, he walks off like, oh shit.
He always looks like he's stumbling every time he goes in for the drive. I don't know what that's about at all. I honestly
his back, his knees, something's giving out there.
I don't think he's had any consistent, nagging injury.
I think there's 2 parts to that. One, he's working himself back into shape, and 2, he's a professional. He's been playing professionally since he was, 13 years old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He knows that if you keep coming out of contested shots looking a little bruised up, you're a little more likely the next go around to get the foul.
Oh, so do you think that's actually why he's doing that?
The strategy?
That's why all the best players do it. All the best players do
It's all the master flopping.
Yeah.
I love it.
Well, I don't know if it's quite flopping. I just think it's like, oh, well, if everybody else is doing it, I'm not going to miss out on free shots,
I think that's for sure. That's in the realm of flopping, though. It's in the same family. Absolutely.
Well, he's not throwing himself on the ground. It's just playing the politics between the lines, so to speak.
Fair enough. I kind of see it as tomato.
Maybe. I think who's a disgusting flopper is Steph Curry.
Oh yeah,
I hate how that guy flops.
Well, there's Steph Curry, Kyrie, Marcus Smart.
Mainly, I mean, the one I've been watching recently has been Steph Curry. I mean, he's not as disgusting as Harden. Harden takes the cake there, but I feel like it's just ridiculous. Right in front of the ref, he'll jump into the guy who's already in the air just to get the foul. It's crazy obvious. The ref is right next to him. That he's breathing on his neck, and he'll still do it and still get it.
He's not even being discreet about it, though. He just analyzes the rule book and figures out exactly what he can get away with.
For sure.
Exactly. He's waiting for this guy to jump in the air, and when he does, he's like, okay, I got you. Then he jumps into him and throws it up and tries to get a 4-point play.
Well, do you think that's – all right.
Yes.
Are you guys for flopping, or do you guys see it as a problem for the league? Because that kind of –
I think it's a problem. I mean, yes, it's effective, but I feel like it's manipulating the sport in a way that it just looks like a disgusting, bitchy way to play the game.
What about you, Ethan?
And that's all sports across the board: soccer, football, whatever. We can.
Yeah, I mean, it's the way the game is played now. I don't know if you can ever revert back before flopping. The thing is, the reason it exists is because the rules have been adjusted to
play a softer game.
To facilitate better offense, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, we don't have the evolution to a Steph Curry and like the 2016 Warriors. if the rules didn't compensate for that, and the byproduct of that is that you're going to have flopping. So it is what it is. I mean, I like the way the game is played now. Generally, I like the fast pace. I like the the high scoring. It is a shame, though, that the pendulum seems to be shifting a little bit too heavily towards that, where you've got teams that I wish I had the stats in front of me, but when the Warriors started doing what the Warriors are have become known for, at least before this specific season, they were the only team in the league to be shooting threes at that volume. Mm-hmm. Now you've got, take your pick,
Phoenix,
bottom third of the team. Time. Well, Phoenix was special, but nothing like what the Warriors had done, and at the time, it was only a few teams, a handful of teams in the league that were even trying to be what the Warriors were. Now, I mean, you could take your pick of the bottom third of the league, and they're shooting threes as if they've got Steph Curry and Klay Thompson on their team.
It's a whole new format that everyone like. All the teams that are rebuilding, they're looking to build the Warriors brand. That's kind of – it is a copycat league.
For sure. And if you've got, special shooters on your team, it's like, well, why not? If you've got Trae Young on your team, why not play that way? But if you've got, fill in the blank, you don't know who they are, you probably don't give up the free layup to shoot a three in the corner.
Absolutely.
Just going back to what Jacob said, he says he thinks he thinks they're doing that whole flopping thing and allowing it because they want to make it a softer game, which I think that plays into it. If you have a guy who's producing millions and millions of dollars from fans buying his jersey, you want this guy to stay as protected as you possibly can. And that's why they're going to allow him to get away. Like they did even in Michael's time. Michael punched Reggie Miller. Reggie Miller was the one who got ejected.
Right.
So, it makes sense, but I hope they eventually get to where they got in soccer, where when refs feel like, okay, this guy's bullshitting, he's faking it just to get something. The problem is if he jumps into the defensive player in basketball, and he jumps into him, he's faking the guy's not blocking him. You're just forcing him to be in your face. That should be like what they would give in soccer, a yellow card. Like you're not fooling anybody here, buddy. They should call those people out, or I don't know which guy on that famous like little post from the Celtics that the guy just dives and jumps like a crazy person
Marcus
who had
Smart.
could have been. They looked like he had a seizure by himself. Nobody touched him.
Probably him.
It could have been. And those things should be like, you should get some type of foul charge on you.
Well, what it's going to take is the reason the rules shifted in the first place is because Steph Curry entered the league and required the rules to change in order to maximize their output. It's going to take something of the opposite to come into the league to impact that, which, I think was part of the reason people were so excited about Zion Williamson.
That's exactly what I was going to say. He slowed the game down a lot.
Yep. So if he starts dominating and starts meeting the expectations that were on him when he entered the league, then all of a sudden things are going to shift.
I don't know, because LeBron doesn't have that game, really. He's not a flopper, and he's a slower presence.
I think LeBron does flop, though. LeBron is definitely in the flopping.
Maybe now, but I haven't seen him in earlier years flopping, like being noticeably a flopper.
He's not egregious.
Now he'll just like scream, but he'll usually plow into somebody and scream like that guy fouled him.
Yeah.
But he was the one causing the contact. So he's not one of those.
Yeah. He always does that thing where he's just like, yeah.
Yeah. And
yeah, I don't know if LeBron couldn't slow the game down enough or have refs second guess, like, okay, we don't need to be that soft in the game when we have some guy producing so well like LeBron. He's slowing it down. He's hitting people. He's making it entertaining. But I just feel like the only way it's going to reverse back to what it was or slightly is not with Zion, but like if people stop showing up because they say like the refs are ruining it for us. But that's an extreme case. I don't know. If you're a basketball fan, you watch it regardless, right? So.
Well, LeBron, I don't think is the best example of like the antithesis of that, because LeBron can do everything at once. That's why he's so good. He's a weapon regardless of what you throw at him. Zion is more of a specific type of player that doesn't have all those tools in his belt. He's just so physically assertive, and he's like a freight train rolling downhill, but he doesn't have, that passing game that LeBron has. He doesn't have the 3-ball that LeBron has. Doesn't have that like point forward mentality that LeBron does. So if Zion takes off, or other players like him take off, that could change the game. And the reason I'm pointing to that being the change is because that's what changed it to what we have today in the first place. It is players like Steph Curry that required the league to take notice and adjust the rules accordingly.
Mm-hmm. I think Zion is the best. I guess if you're looking for the game to slow down, I think Zion is the best hope right now. He's the brightest prospect. So we'll just have to see how dominant he actually is.
The thing is that guy's comparable to like Shaquille O'Neal, and Shaquille O'Neal changed the game when he walked into the court. Zion's not. Right. If Zion faces a 3-point shooting team, he's like, yeah, it's going to be hard to outbody this guy, but we're going to ruin his chances of winning with 3-pointers, which are more effective and less tiring. So I don't think he's going to be much of an impact like Shaquille was in his time.
I think that is definitely something to note too, because one of the things you can never fault Zion for was his effort on the defensive end. I mean, at Duke and even in preseason games for the Pelicans, there were like clips and photos of him just like showing off his reach, just his overall effort for the game. Yeah. And as of right now, I mean, he's getting his points. He's one of I think he is the leading scorer on the Pelicans, if not
I think it's BI.
Okay, well, the second leading scorer. But you see him on the defensive end. He's not the same player. So I don't know if that's just him out of shape, almost like Luka, and he just needs more time too. But a lot of analysts, not just us, are noticing that there is definitely a difference in him this year than there was in past years.
And I think you touched on something that is probably really important to note in this conversation. And it's not, and that is that it's not so much little man versus big man. It's offense versus defense, and what the league and the fans and what the talent brings to the table and what people value. if right now defense is not prioritized because the casual fan doesn't care about defense. You don't see it. You don't notice it unless you watch games all the time.
Mm-hmm.
What you do notice is when guys are able to, pull up from 35 feet like a Steph or a James Harden or a Damian Lillard are able to. And if you can maximize that on a nightly basis, you maximize viewership and you maximize revenue. So
that's a good point. Do you guys have anything else on this on the flopping topic?
No, sir.
Oh, I do want to say this though. If the league is going to keep going towards the 3-point shooting, that whole thing, which obviously it is, and that's great. I think they should make a 4-point bucket though, like
behind the half court.
Yeah, like the half court. Like
I disagree.
I
always thought that should have been a thing. Always.
It should have always been a thing.
If you could make it behind half court, you deserve it.
Like you would have Steph Curry, Damian Lillard, all these guys practicing half court shots, like preparing to take them in games.
I feel like the game would be ruined.
Because it will ruin the game. It'll just be a marathon to get across half court line every game, and it's just going to be just jack it up. I mean, every possession is going to be like 6 seconds long. Just race and throw it up. That's going to be so many teams are going to have that exact game plan, and that's not fun to watch. I currently don't enjoy. Like we talked about so many crappy teams are jacking up shots because that's just the way the game is today. I don't like watching that. If they're going in and you've got special players that can do more to their offense than just jack up, shots and average 32% from three. But if you had a 4-point line, then so many teams are going to be like, okay, that's fine. We'll just play the math game.
Well, I don't think if they add a 4-point bucket or a 4-point line in the game that all the teams that are currently shooting a lot of threes are going to start shooting from half court. I think coaches are going to put a limit to that. I think only the best shooters are going to get a right to shoot past that point. I don't think that's going to be a problem.
The problem is if you have a successful player like Lillard or something, Damian Lillard, that could do that. He scores 3 buckets. He just made 12 points.
Yeah. Like
and it's not about
you could come back.
That's a game changer.
And it's not about current. If you put a 4-point line on the court today, next season it's not going to be all that different. And the current players that are in the league, they're not going to change their game. It's about the high schoolers that are adapting their game to the league that they're seeing and they're projecting themselves in. So 5-6 years down the line, whenever offenses adapt and new players, new blood comes into the league, that's when we're going to start to see the shift. And I don't anticipate that being something I'd like to watch. So I wouldn't support a 4-point line being put in the game.
I think it would just make the game faster and more exciting, in my opinion. So
it's already fast, and I don't appreciate the trend continuing. I like the game today, but I don't want it to get worse.
I think I don't think it's about I think it's not about if, it's about when it gets to that point, because it is only going to get faster. I mean, I think it's only a matter of time before the 4-point play is actually a thing.
I don't think it'll be. The thing is, people nowadays shoot further and they're getting better. Like LeBron just made a logo 3 on like the Grizzly logo,
making them like it's nothing this season.
Yeah,
like it's nothing.
I feel like you already added an advantage when you could open up the floor that far. That you don't need to be added an extra point towards your team. If your team is that good that you could open the floor up that far, you're already at an advantage and the defense is at a disadvantage. So I feel like that's good enough to change the game. Throwing in a point, now you're just making it unfair for the 80% of the teams out there who can't shoot a 3, let alone a half-court shot, when you have a small niche that could do it.
I think with the 4-point play, just one more thing. If that was an actual thing, it would force defenses to basically reinvent themselves because it's so spread out. I think it would be fun to watch both ends of the floor a lot more because it's quicker. Defenses have to be a lot more reactive. They have to be a lot faster. Like it's going to change the whole type of player that can be in the league.
Then they should throw in one more person, 6 against 6. Okay. You have to cover more ground, 6 against 6. The only reason you want to see that, Jacob, is because that's how you play basketball. You can't run into the hole, so you have to freaking shoot it from 3.
I can do anything. I'm basically like the Michael Jordan on the basketball court.
Okay, we should
have my neighborhood park.
A lot of bullshit's being said right now.
Look, we'll just have to settle that next time you're in town. Anyways, so let's just pull it back. We were talking about the MVPs, the MVP race. So I guess that leads us right to the number one spot, who, King James, Goat James, Daddy James, everything, all of the nouns.
Daddy James?
Verbs, everything. LeBron James leads the MVP race in his
King
18th season, leading the Lakers in points, best team in the league, best player, best team. It makes sense. He's averaging 24 points per game, 8 rebounds a game, 8 assists per game, and 1 steal per game.
How much is Luka?
Luka's averaging 27.
Should be him.
His team is the 8th seed.
Okay, he still deserves it.
All right. I don't know if we've officially put this out there for the audience if they're listening, but anything Victor says about LeBron James is going to inherently be biased against him just because he is a closeted LeBron hater. Actually, not even closeted, just a full-out LeBron hater.
You don't have to clarify. They could make up their own opinions.
It's not an opinion, though.
If Victor owned a shirt that said LeBron sucks, he'd wear it every day.
He absolutely would wear it out.
He'd probably wear it to sleep.
I wouldn't want anybody thinking of LeBron. That's why I wouldn't wear it.
Thank you for proving our point. But I mean, I don't think LeBron is gonna end up winning the title, obviously, or winning the MVP, obviously, because I mean, AD is gonna pick it up. AD was slacking for the first little bit of the season. I mean, he came back last night, but AD was struggling. And as he gets better, it's going to be 2 of the top 5 players in the league, and it's impossible for someone to win MVP like that. So I do think it will end up going to Luka as his team gets better as well, but I don't anticipate LeBron staying at the number 1 spot for the entire season.
His defense is pretty sad. Looks like he gives up, saves his energy for offense.
LeBron?
Yeah.
I think that was the case a couple years ago, but last season I don't think LeBron's defense is a knock against him, especially at that point.
I'm talking about last season. I'm not talking about this season.
You're talking about his defense last season?
Yeah, it wasn't impressive.
I thought his defense last season was very impressive. AD challenged him to play more defense, and he met up to that, and they were the number 1 defense
towards the end.
League.
Well, I feel like once Kobe died, he definitely kicked his game up a notch. He seemed more determined, more focused.
To clarify, LeBron does not have a Defensive Player of the Year award. He's got 6 all-time defensive selections. 5 of those were first team, but he does not have a Defensive Player of the Year award.
I thought so. And Michael has 1.
I think so. Mm-hmm.
That's why it would mean a lot if he got 1.
Yeah, but I don't think there's no way. He was going for it in previous years, but his energy is best served on the offensive end, going for an MVP title, than it is getting a Defensive Player of the Year title.
So before we close out the podcast, I think it's only right that we talk about the Nets because we finally got to see Kyrie return back to the team. He played 1 game with Harden while KD sat out. They lost that game. Then the trio finally debuted against the Cavs and Colin Sexton in 2 games, and they lost both games that this trio finally got to play together. And so now that we have a little bit of a sample size, we know that they can score points, but clearly the questions that we had before are still very apparent, and who the hell is going to defend the basketball. So I wanted to know y'all's takes on what this team could be or will be, and all of the above.
Well, my take on it, I feel like Cavs are just learning how to play together. Those 3 guys, I mean, they don't lack talent, and losing against the Cavs reminds me of I think it was like 1992, or when the Dream Team with Michael and Larry Bird and Magic Johnson played in Europe, and they played a college team. They played one-on-one, the Dream Team against them, but there's obviously not lacking talent, but they bombed it. They lost against this college team. Before the reporters came in, they had to reset the scoreboards. I feel like that was the fluke that happened against the Cavaliers. Cavaliers, even with Colin there, he had a great game. I feel like it was just a a well-played game by the Cavs, 2 back-to-back, and the Nets just trying to figure out how is this dynamic between these 3 great players going to work. It's going to take time.
I will say I don't think it's anything new because we saw it with the Miami Big Three and the Big Three on the Warriors whenever KD just joined that team. They lost the first couple games. I mean, there's so much talent between those 3 players on that team that they don't know what to do with the basketball yet. So I'm not too concerned about those losses specifically, but I am worried about the team overall because, I mean, they got balled out against their best defensive player and Jared Allen that they traded away to the Cavs, balled on them both games, dominated them. And it's because they don't have any defensive players anymore. And so I think by the time the playoffs comes around, they need to have made a couple of changes or trades or something to bring some defensive guards or pretty much just anybody who can stand in front of the basketball to help these guys out a little bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's layers to this. One, like you just mentioned, Jacob, Jared Allen was on that team, had been on that team for a few years. Now he's on the other team on the first night that the trio gets to be together. So he knows how they play. He knows what they do out of timeouts. He was their defensive anchor, and now he's playing against them. That's big. Number 2, the other big part of this is that it shows how important it is to always remember that basketball is a team game. Even if you've got 3 all-time players on the same team, you've got to be able to go deep in your bench, especially on a regular season night when you're trying to rest your players. Because as we saw with both of those Cavs games, it wasn't like Kevin Durant scored 6 points, or it wasn't a night like that for any of them. It's not like James Harden, was shooting 15% from the field. All 3 of those guys, both nights, were having stellar offensive performances. We can't point to any one of them and say that's why they lost. They lost because if your entire game plan is, well, we've got 3 all-time players on your team, well, it's going to amount to best case scenario like 90 points. And if you're only scoring 90 points, you're not going to win the game. You've got to be able to go deep. You've got to be able to be an offensive unit. So if that means you're playing the Cavs, but the Cavs knew who they are and they know who's going to get the ball when, and they've got an idea about, diving over screens and, cutting off ball and shit like that, that's going to matter. And yeah, like you said, I don't know if Jacob or Victor mentioned it. I think Victor mentioned it, that it's their first time together. They're still figuring it all out. Yeah, it's going to get better. But it's really indicative that if they don't make some moves, especially defensively, or at least get some competent threats offensively that aren't the big 3, they're not going to go that deep in the playoffs. It's not going to matter. You're going to need to have some other pieces to throw at teams when it gets, crunch time and when they start playing, a series versus another team. Because if you've got 7 games, you can figure that stuff out pretty quickly.
And that is, I will say, I mean, yes, they have to make a couple trades, but this is super important, especially since the organization, the Nets, have made it very clear that they're going all in on the next 2 seasons. So they have to win now. Because, I mean, free agency is always right around the corner, but it's especially right around the corner for KD. And I know that the reports were, I mean, James Harden was really just insurance so that KD would re-sign with them. Once his free agency rolls around, but they got to figure this out right now because if these playoffs don't go well, if they lose in the first round or the second round, that could severely impact how that team's going to look moving forward. Like this year especially counts a lot. They have to at least make the finals.
I think that team is doomed. You have Harden, who's used to a whole organization built a system around him. So he's a spoiled little shit ever since he left Oklahoma. And you got Kyrie, where he's a plague wherever he shows up. So if you have to build chemistry with 2 guys, those are like the 2 worst guys you possibly could build chemistry with. And maybe KD's going into it like, okay, I know Harden. I worked with him before. It's going to be okay. He's very talented. And then it shows up, the playoffs are going to show up. He's going to shit the bed. And he's going to be like, where's that Harden that I knew? Now I have to rely on Kyrie. And if you have to rely on Kyrie for team effort and chemistry, it's a disaster. I feel like any team shoots themselves in the foot when you get Kyrie involved.
Well, to be honest, I don't know if you feel the same, Ethan. I'm not really. I was a little concerned at the beginning. The more I think about it, and the more that I'm watching James Harden on the Nets, and I know that it's new to the team, so he's in that honeymoon phase. I'm not as worried about James Harden's chemistry with the team. I think he's way more willing to buy into the system. I don't think he's going to be a problem. I think the problem is that Kyrie, for every game that those three have played together, he's taken the most shots in the fourth quarter. Like he thinks that he is the number one option going down the stretch whenever he has Kevin Durant on the floor. And the fact that he thinks that he's the best player on that team and he thinks that he should be taking the last shot. I mean, obviously there's going to be games where he takes the last shot, where James Harden takes the last shot, where KD takes the last shot, but it needs to be decided by KD who takes that last shot, not Kyrie bringing the ball up and not passing it to anyone else. I think that in line with, the chemistry issues that we already know that he's had in the past and has already had with this team. I think that is like the main thing that we need to focus on. I'm not worried about James Harden really.
Well, so one thing is Kyrie is making those shots. He's averaged like 30 something points in the last like 4 games. He's playing very, very well. So it's not that he is his confidence is unwisely put in himself, so to speak. Like he's playing very well, but to the point you both are making is that does cause chemistry ripples down the line, which could be a problem.
It'll work for 2 games against the Cavs, but it's not going to work if you want to win a title in the playoffs.
And that's the other thing. I had another point I wanted to make, but this is pretty important. This is something I've been thinking about a lot in the past few days. Yeah, they lost both games with the Cavs. Could be an aberration, first time together. But the games that they are winning, the last couple of games that they did win, they've only squeaked by. They're not blowing anybody out. This is one of the best offensive trios we've ever seen, and they barely beat the Heat without Jimmy Butler last night. Barely.
I watched that game. They were up by double digits, and I forgot how many minutes were left in the fourth, but it was, a good few minutes left, and they were only up by 1. Like the Heat, they allowed the Heat to catch up to them, and they were barely able to squeeze that away. So I know they won 128 to 124. They were up by a good amount and let all that slip.
Yep, and I think that's really important. We haven't seen them. Well, actually, I think they did face the Bucks, but I think it's really important to remember that these win margins are not substantial. They're squeaking by. Like Kyrie feels the need to win the game for them because at the end of the game, you don't know who's going to win. So that's something important to remember. But something I want to ask both of you, the trade that was made, all the assets that went for James Harden, and you lost Jared Allen, do you think that was the right trade to make, or would you have rather traded Kyrie for James Harden straight up?
Well, I don't know. Because the thing is, I don't have faith in Harden, so trading him for somebody, I feel like Kyrie's more talented, where he brings bullshit to the table. Harden seems more talented in the season, but then when it comes to playoffs, he's not as good or reliable as Kyrie. So I wouldn't trade him straight up. I don't have faith in Harden. Harden for me is a Paul George waiting to happen. So I would say it's the trade they did is probably better.
I agree that James Harden has issues in game 7s and, late in the playoffs, all that, but at least Harden can get you to the playoffs. Kyrie has proven that he cannot do that. And before Kyrie came back, we got to see 2 games with KD and James Harden, and we saw how dominant they were with that offense. I was thinking, and if I was actually thinking about that exact question that you asked, I think they would be much better off of just trading James Harden for Kyrie straight up, because they'd still have their defense. I mean, you saw how well they played for those 2 games together without Kyrie, without their defense, because they traded it all away. If they had Jared Allen and Taurean Prince on that team, which, the DeAndre Jordan issue is something else that needs to be addressed on that team as well. But absolutely, I think that 1-for-1 trade would have been a lot better for the Nets.
I agree. I would have traded Kyrie for James Harden straight up, and for several reasons. One, you keep your assets, you keep your defensive presence. They were 15th in the league in defense before they traded Jared Allen. That's enough, right? And they would have been able to have that. Number two, a two-man game is easier to figure out than having to juggle three dominant offensive presences on the court at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Number three, James Harden and Kevin Durant have already played together. They already know who each other are. Obviously, James Harden has developed to become an MVP in his own dominant presence on his own team since that time. But they've already got chemistry. They already know how the other plays. It would have been easy for them to fall into a one-man, two-man situation going into the playoffs. When you throw a Kyrie who was there before James Harden, and Kyrie thinks he's the best player in the world probably anyway, and he probably thinks it's him, and he probably thinks it's at the end of the game, he's already said as much, that it could be him or KD. And then you throw in the chemistry issues. I think it would have been a much smarter move to go with just a James Harden swap for Kyrie.
If I'm the Nets right now, I think they should be looking at teams, I don't know how they make it work with a Rudy Gobert type or just someone to get some defense there for Kyrie. Because I personally would still trade Kyrie away for defense and then keep Kevin Durant and James Harden as your duo. I think the trio with those three specifically is going to be too hard to manage. I think trios worked before. Chris Bosh was able to do it because the third star obviously has to take a step back. Kyrie is not going to be willing to do that, and that's the one that needs to take a step back. So eventually it's going to be a problem. They have too much offensive talent on one team.
Well, you could stagger the game. You don't have to have all three, each one begging for the ball. You have the one who likes to be the loner, most likely Kyrie Irving, to be staggered.
And have him roll with the second unit.
Yeah,
which they did versus the Heat.
Playing. Huh?
They
That's
did that versus the Heat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I didn't realize that Jared was out. Allen, they switched him.
Yeah,
for part of that trade.
Yeah, it was like a
that's
3 or 4
that guy.
Trade, but yeah,
he was there with last year was he a starter on the Nets, and he seemed like he was a big guy and he was good at what he did. So that's a pity for sure. But I don't know, having that much talent, because then they're always a threat every moment of the game when you have three amazing players. Because when you have like LeBron and AD, it's like, okay, we have to wait, save LeBron no matter what till the fourth quarter. And if they're not doing well, we got to throw in our second guy. When you have three, you could stagger them. I felt like that's still a better chance. They got to do something about defense, but
and they played with that. They did a KD with a Kyrie game, which they've already felt comfortable doing that because that's obviously how they started the season. And they pulled both of them at the same time and then put James Harden in with the whoever's left still playing in the game. A mixture of starters and bench players. Obviously, James Harden is going to feel too comfortable doing because that's more or less what his game has been regardless before all this. So that could be, I still have them coming out of the East regardless. This is all speculation on what they could be if they had done something different. But there are a lot of reasons for concern. And if I was rooting for them to win the championship, I would be very worried.
Well, I would have hope they're going to win the championship, but not this year. I feel like they have to learn how to play. They got to figure out defense, and they got to wait till LeBron is 1 year older. With that team with AD is unstoppable.
I feel like the team is currently constructed is not going to be coming out of the East. I think they have to make a move. The lack of defense is going to be apparent. I do like if they don't make any changes, I don't think they're coming out of the East. I think it's going to be the Sixers or the Bucks or anyone else, but they don't have any defense.
I've got them coming out of the East for sure.
I just don't see it. And, on top of the defensive issue, we've talked about it, but the whole chemistry issue that we don't even know what's going to happen. We're like 4 games deep with these guys. So it's going to be one reality TV show we're just going to be watching fall apart. So that is my pessimism for that team.
Well, depth doesn't matter as much in the playoffs.
I think the defense does, though. Defense
definitely does. Defense definitely does, which they should figure out some type of competency when it comes to that.
Yeah.
But it's not going to matter. At a certain point, offensive presence is going to take precedent. But when they get to the finals, I think it'll be a different story.
All right, well, I guess we'll go ahead and end that there. I feel like we've gone over at least the main topics in the NBA thus far. But now that we are all kind of going back to normal with our schedules, we can actually get a schedule going for the podcast, maybe once or twice a week. So I'm pretty excited about that. I appreciate you guys joining, and we will catch you guys in the next one.
Later.
Later.
Take care.